Hello and welcome back. Let's try that again. Okay. Hope everybody got their coffee. We're 3 o'clock and we are after 2 great sessions, and you're in for an absolute treat. Coming up, we have Professor Rohit Nishant. He's the Axis Leader on Emerging Technologies, coming from Université Laval in Quebec. Always a place on my list of places to go, and I never quite got around to it. But that's not to say it won't happen in the future. So Professor Rohit is here today to talk to us about artificial intelligence for sustainability, the very essence of this whole 2-day event. He's going to talk about the challenges, the opportunities, and the research agenda. So you are in for a treat. So, as always, we're going to start off with a question. This question was something we worked on. It's one that I think is a very straightforward question, probably the most straightforward question that we've come across so far in the 2 days. So the question really is, what should be the path forward for AI? And it's one or the other answer. Should it be a pure technical focus, or should it be a socio-technical perspective? The way to get involved in this discussion is to go to menti.com on your phone or on your desktop. Oh, straight in there. Great. Use menti.com and use the code 1130945. So I'm going to give you about a minute to get your votes in. Given the area of focus for this session, I imagine I can predict where the voting will go, but you never know. So it's as easy as that. You just type in the code 1130945 and you select. I think you're going to have some fans, Nishant. I don't think there's going to be any naysayers in this camp, but I could be wrong. Great. Everyone's of a similar vein, similar perspective. No hard sell this week. Okay, I'm just conscious of time, so I am going to give you 5 seconds. Great, guys, thank you very much. Always good to get involved. That's super stuff. Great, now I will stop sharing my screen. We are delighted to have you, Professor Rohit, all the way from Quebec, and I am eager to know what time it is there in the day, but I'm sure you'll tell us. We're looking forward to your presentation. You can take it away.
Thanks for the introduction. So it's 10 a.m. in Quebec. It's early morning here, and the winter I see. So in Quebec, there are only 2 seasons, which we say it's a mild winter or it's extreme winter. So right now we are in the mild winter, 16-17 degrees Celsius, but slowly we are gradually moving toward -5, -6, or maybe -20, -30 in January. So from Quebec standard, it's quite nice weather for the time being. Now, it was good to see that a lot of people are agreeing to the view that we should not have just a technical approach to the artificial intelligence development which is going on. And over last 2 days, we had several presentations where we looked at what potentials, what changes which AI is going to bring to our life. The pandemic has accelerated the digital transformation. One of the example is this conference, which is happening virtually, not face to face. So it's a big change. And we will see that technology becoming a central stone of our life. But with technology, there are also certain things which we need to be aware of. So in this presentation, there will be slight divergence from the other presentation where we will definitely talk about the potential, but as a social scientist, I will also be acting like a devil's advocate. So the presentation tone will be, look, this is what's happening, but this is a word of caution. And finally, we will end up with a cautious optimism about it. So I will start sharing my presentation and I will give the background and I will take you slowly through what, as a social scientist or as a management researcher, how we see the evolution of AI. So let me know if my presentation is visible, the slide deck is visible. Is my slide visible? Okay, thanks. So today I will be talking about a specific issue of sustainability. Artificial intelligence is used in across the different discipline, but this is focused on a specific issue of sustainability. So what I will do is I will make the presentation full screen first, and then I will start talking about the approach. So just give me a minute. Is it good now? Great. So we are good to go. So today we will be focusing on the issue of sustainability. So if you look at the news for last few weeks, I have just noted down some of the news item from the last few weeks. You can see that AI is being used across the discipline with the specific objective of promoting sustainability. So AI is used for making a recipe which consumes less resource. AI is used for managing your carbon footprint. So what we can easily say is that without any doubt is that AI era has truly arrived. So for example, if you look at the statistics here is that venture funding in AI companies had reached a mind-blowing $61 billion. So that's clearly give you an idea that AI has truly arrived. But if you look at the next item is the opinion piece, which was published 2 weeks back in MIT Technology Review, was that many AI researchers are focusing on technological novelty. They are looking at developing algorithms, they are looking at developing novel solutions, but there is less focus on real world. Now, this from a social scientist perspective is slightly intriguing because if you look at the sustainability issue is not only a technical issue, it involves different stakeholders, it involves processes, it involves people, it involves organizations, and with that you have all the contextual element associated with society kicks in. So when you have people involved, you have cultural issue. When you have organizations involved, you have organizational politics. So what you can see is that when we are talking about when we are talking about sustainability, we cannot be taking a purely technical perspective. So what we did was, so we are doing a lot of research to understand this AI evolution from a social science perspective. So what we did was, first step was to look at what's happening. So what we did was we looked at what is the current state of studies which are talking about using artificial intelligence for sustainability perspective. And what we found was that basically we are looking at primarily technical studies, which are new methods and new models. But in social science and even in data mining class, if you are taking any data science class, we always say that all models are wrong, but some are useful. So basically what we say is that yes, models are useful. It can help you in prediction. It can help you in understanding the phenomena, but you have to understand that it's not the absolute truth. As far as social science is concerned, this is a dominant view that we should be looking at technical advances, but we should not ignore the context, our social context, which is going to play a big role. So my entire presentation will be actually presenting to you what we are finding from our research, what are the new things which we are planning to do as a course of our research, and what other people in my stream, my domain are focusing on. So this will give you a complete idea about how social science and management is looking at AI. So I will be going to now more details of our study. Now, if you look at social science view, we see few challenges for artificial intelligence for sustainability. And these are primarily five challenges. The first thing which we see is that, okay, we know that in AI, the key thing is you need large amount of data for training your models. So definitely data is the key input, key raw material for the artificial intelligence. But the problem is that we have seen that sometimes we lack data on what we call as black swan event, and that could hamper the prediction in an appropriate manner. So what we find is that there is too much reliance on prediction. There is less focus on scenario planning, which takes into account that the data was there in the past. You have the past data, but that could not be predicted for future because environment is dynamic, things are changing very fast, and some of these changes which are happening now can't be captured in the past data. The next, what we are seeing is that AI is used to create a lot of intervention, which is very nice idea. But what we have to be prepared for is there is uncertain human behavioral response, and this human behavioral response can diverge across cultures. It can diverge across different countries. It can diverge across different governance system. And we can see the example of solely relying on technology in this pandemic era. So we are seeing that a lot of countries have started developing or have launched your contact tracing apps. Now we are seeing in many part of the world, they are not accepted by the people. They are looking at it as infringement of their privacy rights. So what we have to be always cautious is that there is human behavioral response to AI based intervention, which could diverge, which has a strong cultural context, and we should not ignore that. The next thing which we have to look at is that for AI, we need a lot of data, but data comes with risk. So today there is a social media data in financial institution. There is a lot of banking transaction data which is used for credit risk modeling. So they are used for a lot of many data intensive exercises, but it also increases your cybersecurity risk. So we have to figure that we have to factor in. Then adverse impact of AI application. Now this is something interesting. We are very fascinated by building models which are complicated, but when we build a complex model, we need a lot of computing power. When we use a lot of computing power, it itself has an environmental impact. The computers which we are using, the data center which is running, it also has adverse environmental impact. So if we are trying to use AI to help improvement of environment, and we ourselves are contributing to the adverse consequences for environment in terms of carbon footprint, energy footprint, we will have to see how we can balance it. And finally, there is a difficulty in measuring effect. This is a big challenge. In social science, in management, we are always looking at what is the end value. Now, and the problem with measuring anything related to human behavior is that it's very difficult to measure what exactly is the value. So, and that itself is a big question, because if we cannot establish the value of something, that idea itself is not sustainable. Now, why I am saying this is today we are talking about artificial intelligence. But we have to remember that in past also AI has been hyped, and we have seen through the cycles of AI winter where the funding for AI actually gradually declined. Why? Because there was not effective capturing of value of AI. So what we also need to do is we have to now show that AI has a definite tangible value for whatever purpose it is used. Otherwise, the venture capitalists who are putting a lot of money into AI, their interest could also decline. So these are five challenges which we are seeing for AI for sustainability. Now moving forward, what we see as a social scientist is that we have to if we have to make sure that AI remains to be a viable option for sustainability, AI is definitely the technological solutions which can help address the issue of sustainability, because sustainability is a very complicated problem. It involves different stakeholders. It has distinct dimension on environment, economic, and social. So if this has to continue to be in focus, future studies perhaps should look at these 5 points. The first one is, when we look at AI application, when the data is trained, we are often looking at just one unit of analysis, but the problem is in our society, there are different levels. So for example, at this point of time, I am playing different role. So I am a part of a society which is ruled by the government, and that country is governed by international treaties. So there are different levels and each has an impact on me. So the one thing which we should always remember is that we need to have a multi-level view. Do not look at each unit in isolation. Now, as a part of society, different units are interacting with each other. So individuals interact with each other, they influence each other. Individuals interact with government and is influenced by government and influence government, and countries influence each other. So there is a lot of system interaction going on. So we should be looking at system dynamics approach. The third thing is we should be looking at design thinking. Now, this is very important if we have to make an AI which itself has a less carbon footprint, because we have seen in operations management discipline, manufacturing, that there are concept of design for environment. So what we can do is we can borrow some of these idea and look AI development in a similar manner as we approach designing a product or service, and then we focus on reducing its adverse environmental impact. Now, the next thing which we have to look at is that we should not ignore psychological and sociological consideration. So, for example, in the previous talk, there was mention about using social media data. Now, social media data is a big source of data and it's generated in real time. Now, but what we have to understand is when people are tweeting or posting, there is a context to it. Each individual has its own personality type. Each individual also is grounded in its own context. And all these are actually reflected in the tweets and the Facebook post. So in a medical parlance, somebody will say that these tweets and these Facebook posts are just the symptom, they are not the root cause. So if we have to get to the root cause of this data, that will be quite helpful in understanding how we can use training the machine to achieve more positive objectives. So focus on psychological and sociological consideration. And finally, we cannot deny that economic value is critical if something has to remain sustainable. So we should be focusing on measuring the tangible value of AI intervention so that we can have a strong business case for it. So this is what social science prescription for AI for sustainability is. Now, after we looked at the literature and we came to certain views on how social science would approach AI for sustainability, we are doing a lot of other studies. So for example, now we are seeing that how AI for sustainability is now evolving in practice. So these are some of the real examples which we are seeing in real life. So one of the things which AI is actually helping is generating data. So now there are companies, you can see on the screen images of 2 companies. One is the True Value Lab and the another one is NOSA Data. So these are the companies with which we are working. What these companies are actually doing is they are using artificial intelligence, machine learning, uh, your natural language processing to generate real-time data, which can help us in understanding the state of firms' environmental initiative, how companies are doing in real time in terms of environmental initiative. Now, what it will do is once you have a good data quality, it can help you in coming out with a more correct approach to managing your environmental performance. So we are now what seeing is that there are a lot of companies which are coming in, which are filling a gap where they are using AI ML to generate data. And as we know that in AI, good data is critical for training your machines to come with a better insight. So we are seeing a lot of new happening in that space, and these two are just few examples of that. Now what it doing next is sorry, just give me a minute. I think the screen has frozen. Just give me a minute. Yeah, just give me a minute. This is one of the example of the issues with technologies. So, and that's why social science view is important, that technology can have some issues coming from the environment. So coming back to the presentation, so what we are seeing is that how AI for sustainability is evolving is that we are seeing a lot of companies which are helping in generating the data to improve the environmental governance, to help companies understand where exactly they are doing in terms of environmental performance, improve that. And one thing which these AI generated data set is doing is that it helps companies sense what's going on. So in social science, it's very important that you know exactly where you are. The path to a future lies in understanding where you exactly stands as of now. So these data sets are helping in under, helping companies in understanding where they stand. So this is one of the big practice which is evolving as far as AI for sustainability is concerned. Now, what we are also seeing is that companies are using AI to offer intelligent solutions. They are combining it with cloud offerings. So we are seeing that companies realize that you need a lot of data for AI, but data storage also has a cost. So they are combining it with cloud offering. They are also focusing on artificial intelligence and machine learning, not only for offering solutions for customers, but also for their own internal processes. So what we are seeing as a social scientist is that companies are engaging in creating new data sets, which is an opportunity. They are also using AI to offer intelligent solutions, which is an opportunity, as well as they are focusing on managing their own processes. So this helps companies to leverage AI to make big changes to their carbon footprint, their environmental sustainability. Now, one thing what we need to understand is, but if you look at all this, you can clearly see that this actually relates to the social science prescription. Because when we talk about solutions, companies using AI and machine learning to offer product, we have to take into account human consumer behavior, human psychology, whether they will be accepted or not. We will have to take into account the cultural context because that will be salient in human behavior. So again, these practices relate to social science prescription of looking at psychology, looking at sociology, looking at the context to leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning. In overall, what we are seeing is that companies are using artificial intelligence for knowledge combination and reuse. So they are using data, they are combining different data to make a better use of it. So for example, we are seeing some companies which had stored data, legacy data, and now they are, because of the advancement of AI, machine learning, now they are combining different data set to give a better prescription. They are using it for new knowledge generation. So for example, you have seen some examples this time during the COVID pandemic where a lot of scientific publisher, they made their COVID related knowledge online so that other people can use machine learning NLP to derive some other insight from it. So it's being used for knowledge generation, and it's also used for validating knowledge. So this is how the AI for sustainability is evolving as in practice. Now, but one of the key question is sustainability is a complex problem. So if sustainability is a complex problem, how will different stakeholder react to it? And this is a key question which we are looking at in our future research. So what we are doing is that we are looking at as a part of our ongoing research. So if you look at it, there are three parts which I have talked about till now. The first one, as a social scientist, we looked at what is the current state of AI research. Then in the next stage, we looked at what companies are doing. And in the third stage, what we are doing right now is we are trying to understand how different stakeholders are responding to different AI. Now, why this is important? Because as I told you that in socio-technical perspective, we cannot ignore different stakeholders because their acceptance or their denial of potential of AI will decide the future of AI. So in third stage, what we are doing is we are looking at how different stakeholders are responding to it. So what we did was the earliest indicator what we can see for acceptance or rejection of AI will come from the market, because market respond very quickly to any AI initiative. So what we did as part of our study was we looked at how market is reacting to different AI announcement. So we found that market reacted negatively to omnipotent AI. Now, what do we mean by that? By omnipotent AI, we mean that AI which claims to do everything. What we found was that market didn't react positively to that. What we found in the second stage was that market reacted to positively to information oriented AI. So as we can see that currently we are talking a lot about data. There is a lot of talk about business analytics. There is a lot of talk about data science as a career, how companies can leverage big data. We are also seeing that market prefer to focus on this information orientation. So there is a preferred focus on information oriented AI. Finally, what we are seeing is that automation is acceptable to the market. Definitely because it will improve the productivity, it will lower down the cost. So market is reacting positively to that. But one of the key things which we are seeing in terms of market response is that the market expect AI to focus more on generating data, information, and insight. And if now you connect it back to few of the previous slide where we saw that companies, some of the new next generation new companies are exactly coming to fill that space. Now, this is how the sustainability as AI for sustainability as a field has panned out. It has been too technical in nature. So social science is saying that, look, it's good to have a technical approach, but do not ignore context, psychological perspective, sociological perspective. Now, when we look at what companies are doing, we can see that companies are talking about using AI for generating new data, for generating new information from new data sets, or generating new information from existing data set. In terms of stakeholder, since market is one of the earliest predictor of whether something is accepted or not. So what we are seeing is that stock market, here we are talking about a stock market because there we can see the we can see the reaction very quickly. We are seeing that there is a negative response to omnipotent AI, but there is more preferred focus on information oriented AI. Now, then what are the issues which we see will be key issues for AI for sustainability? Now, what we are seeing is that there is increasing focus. If you have seen the past few slides, there has been more focus on environmental dimension. But what we are seeing is that there will be increasing focus on social dimension of sustainability. Now, what do we mean by social dimension of sustainability is that if you have heard recent news about that certain companies try to use artificial intelligence for recruitment and they found it to be a biased process. Now, why that's happening? Because the data set which used for training that had some inherent biases, because if you look at it, data is reflection of our society. It's a reflection of our social processes, and our social processes, if you look at our social processes cultural context, we had subtle biases in the way human behaves. And the issue with artificial intelligence and machine learning is, since it's dealing with so much data, it can amplify that. So there is increasing focus on social dimension to address issues related to racial concerns, ethnic concerns. The idea is that we should try to develop an AI which is we should try to develop an AI which is bias free. So that's there is an effort to, we will see more and more focus on that, specifically in social science. The next thing which we are talking about is demand supply mismatch. So AI focuses a lot on demand supply. So how does it figure in? So if you look at it, there is a lot of talk about automation. So definitely automation will increase the supply of product and services. But what will happen is that if supply is there and people are getting less job opportunity, their income declines, where will be the demand for that? So there is an increasing focus on the potential demand supply mismatch which AI can create. And finally, on the psychological impact, if you are creating AI intervention, if you are bringing in technology like AR and VR, augmented reality, virtual reality, how will it influence human understanding, human behavior, human cognition? So these are the evolving issues as far as AI for sustainability is concerned. So this was all about presenting, all about AI for sustainability in my presentation. I am open for questions.
Hello, and that was an excellent session and quite interestingly linked quite fundamentally to it linked quite fundamentally to John's presentations at the opening session, Vinny's presentation this morning, and again to Roseanne's presentation. So there was a clear vein that trust, ethics are at the core of adoption of AI, and there's a concern. Even it came up as a question today with Professor Vinny Cahill around the flying cars and all the rest of it. That we may not go 100% to autonomous, but we may have to go a little step at a time. And that seems to be the way, even in your own research, that you're seeing something similar. So just on any of the questions. So we have one question, Aina, around the Omnipotent AI. Are there examples of companies using this at present?
Okay, so in social science, there is so this is like the language which we speak. So when we talk about something in a science language and something in a social science language. So for example, if you talk to an engineer about omnipotent AI, their definition of omnipotent AI will be really very powerful. Now, what we mean in terms of social sciences, that companies are talking about AI which promises to do a lot of things. Now, what three things which we are looking at for defining omnipotent AI? So if you look at AI, what it can do is, it can do one is automation. It can remove human and do things very fast. The next thing which it can do is it can generate new insight, new data, which I referred to in my presentation. The third thing where a lot of development is actually happening is cognitive engagement. So you are seeing a lot of products coming from different companies, which they say that we are trying to mimic human thinking to make machine more smart, right? And there, so when a company tries to emphasize on all these three, market becomes slightly cautious about it. because market think that yes, automation, we have been used to it. There has been, so industrial revolution led to automation. We have been talking about automation for last 20-30 years. So rather than having a physical conference, you have a digital conference. So that's a form of automation. But when you are trying to say that, look, we are trying to uh, make something very close to human thinking, somehow market is not preferring that. Now, again, from a social scientist perspective, it's very intriguing. Is it because market doesn't believe that, or is it market is scared of that something like that can happen? Because if you look at market, what market is, it's actually made up of individuals, right? We all have our fears. So the people who are investing in a stock market, would they like their job to go away because of a machine? Definitely not, right? So we don't know whether that's a reflection of their own fear, or they think that no, that technology has not advanced. And that makes this very intriguing because human behavior is more complex, right? We might think in human behavior 2 plus 2 will not be 4. It could be 5, it could be 3 also, depending upon what else can come in. And that's where social science will be focusing a lot on what is the philosophical basis. There is, you can see a lot of this philosophical debate in TV series. I'm not sure how many of you watch a TV series called The Good Place. If you look at it, so if you look at it, there is a point system for gradation of who goes where. So heaven or hell. So, and there you can see that there are a lot of philosophical and ethical questions. Now for God, that perhaps nobody will question God, but for humans who will be dealing with using data to create a system, there will be a lot of ethical boundaries. And we are slowly going toward that. And you will hear a lot about ethical standard for AI. You will hear about governance standard for AI. So from, you will see a lot of government intervention, because if a powerful AI goes into, say, a terrorist hand, you can just imagine what it can do, right? So you will hear a lot about a lot of these intervention.
Absolutely. I think it's probably been, it'll be interesting to see, but COVID-19, adoptions of apps and all that kind of stuff, even from a privacy point of view, might shift and change perspective from a human behavior side, which will be something to watch. One question is after coming in, Rohit, about, they said it was a very interesting presentation. What do you think of unintended consequences of AI, where an algorithm is maybe focused on a specific outcome at the expense of other possible unknown factors? It's from Kieran Sexton.
Okay, so AI is going, it's a very fascinating field, and but we can't claim that we don't know what will be the issue. So for example, now for last few months we are not flying, but if you enjoy traveling, you know that uh, these days modern aircraft are so advanced that beside your takeoff and landing, throughout your travel, most of the time, your machine computer is actually flying you, right? Now, there are a lot of studies happening in social science which says that when humans become accustomed to these machines working, when a real crisis arises, we don't know how to respond. So for example, if you have a machine doing a surgery in an operation theater, till the time it's working fine. See, this is interesting thing about computer. Till the time it works well, it's flawless. But when computer or when the screen freezes or something bad happens, you get irritated. So, but this is a small stake game. In operation theater, if machine malfunction and you have doctors who have not faced such a situation before that because they never had to. Now think about it, what could happen? So the problem with AI is, the biggest problem which we as a social scientist is concerned about is that will AI become close to human, but human will actually see a depreciation in their own cognitive ability. So that is something which is very troubling for us. The other example, I'm not sure you have seen that example of Samsung ad where you have a ostrich actually taking on the headset, VR headset, and then forgets that ostrich can't fly. So the other challenge which is perhaps is that you are using so much of VR, AR, AI that you you get into a world of a delusion, psychological delusion. So we don't know what will happen. Will these kind of things will lead to increase in psychological disorder? Again, their health science, psychologists, all these will have to come in and figure it out. And these are not very these are not what we can say futuristic. It's happening. So for example, I'm not sure how many of you play PUBG, the popular game. Now, a lot of people are saying that if you talk to the parent, they will say that they are making our kids psychopath. And this is a very popular game. So this is a very popular game. So you can see that these are the things which we are going to see. It will be a lot of debate, and the what pandemic has done is somehow it accelerated the rate. So suddenly everything is being adopted because we have to avoid physical contact, physical touch. But once this pandemic settle down, hopefully in 2021 we will be out of it, then we will start thinking about these questions. Right now, perhaps we have a bigger challenge at our hand of controlling the pandemic.
That's really interesting, Rohit. You're implying that post-pandemic there'll be kind of an element of rollback potentially, because if you adapt, the people tend not to move away from it again. You know, the rollback never really happens. But that's ties beautifully into a question here, that how has the experience of COVID thrust us too quickly into an AI world, and are we in fact ready for it?
That's the question. And you see, any major crisis, the black swan event has two distinct impact on society. So for example, once this pandemic is over, there will be two set of people. The one who will never prefer physical conference, and the second one will be who will be desperate to go out and attend a physical conference because it's too much now. So you will see a very two distinct kind of very polarized debate on what should be the next step. And you know, our society is becoming more and more polarized thanks to the social media. So I hope that we in this polarized world we have a sane debate on pros and cons, and we arrive at a solution which is agreed upon, which is mutually acceptable, rather than just saying that this is good or this is bad. The thing is, the world is not white or black. It will be somewhere in the gray, right? So we have to go to that area.
Yes, I think that's absolutely, it makes perfect sense. One question that's here is, you mentioned in your presentation, Rohit, that demand supply, that there's a demand supply mismatch basically with the market. Can you explain and expand a little bit on this and maybe reference some research on it?
Yeah, so this is happening. So in social science, and if specifically in technology related research, the earlier there was the issue of productivity paradox. So a lot of people before this AI used to say was that we invest in computer, we don't get the return. Now AI is a disruptive technology in that respect, that if you have automation, so for example, look at Amazon warehouse. I was watching the video. You can count the number of people there and you can see that there are too many robots there. Now what this can do is that first, it's saying that definitely demonstrating that machines can do something better than us, definitely repetitive task. And what automation can do is it can increase the production number of unit produced quickly, very fast. But the thing is that you have a lot of people who will be, whose jobs will, whose real time wages will not increase because machine is doing better job. There will be many people who will be out of job. Now, if that's the case, you are producing a lot of items. Where are you going to sell that? Because ultimately it has to find a market. So you can scale up production very fast. But where is the demand? And this is not something which we are talking about in isolation. If you look at the current pandemic, what different government is actually trying to do through all these fiscal stimuluses, keep the demand at the same level at pre-pandemic level, because they know that industrial production can be scaled up fast. But if there is no demand, there is no need for those goods. And what's happened to your GDP numbers? So this will be a big issue because you can't have 1%, 2% people. You can't have few people who are billionaire or trillionaire. If you are watching the stock market, you can see that Apple valuation was $2 trillion last week. So if you look at the Google, Amazon, all those companies, they are bigger than countries in terms of if you consider them as a country. But that means you have few people who are very rich, but what about 80-90% of the population? You have, if they don't have money, they don't purchase things. I think that's not sustainable. Even for very rich people, they need a market to sell their products.
There's a question here, Rohit, and just given your research from a behavioral point of view, one is there's an argument that you would have humans and automation working together, and that's the way of the future. Do you think this is the case?
It will have to, because otherwise there is a big existential crisis for us also. We don't know whether those movies like Matrix, how far we are away from that singularity, all those, but we are not going into that. But the more practical issues, we have to make sure that as a human, we know that creativity is our skill. Machines can do more repetitive jobs, but definitely people, science and technology will keep advancing, but we will have to take a deep breath, pause, and see that we should control the rate at which it's progressing. And we should, what I'm not saying is that reduce the rate, we should just make it more progressive in nature, more organic in nature. Let the society come to terms with it, and slowly things evolve. Don't make all of a sudden jump, because then you will see, and this is not just restricted to this. Uh, this is this is a common sense. So for example, for last 20-25 years there was globalization. Now you suddenly see from across the countries, people are talking about globalization is not benefiting them. So in future, perhaps there will be a technological development. People will say that no, our past 20 years back we had a peaceful life. So human society could have a lot of different implications. What, as a human society, it's always better to have an organic growth rather than an inorganic growth where you could have a lot of unintended consequences. And the challenge with unintended consequences is you don't know what exactly they can be. It's unintended, right? So you never thought for or prepared for beforehand.
Absolutely agree with you. Professor Rohit Nishant from Université Laval in Quebec. It was an absolute pleasure having you on today. It was great, and thank you for getting up this morning and joining us. We really enjoyed having you.
Thanks a lot.